Hello and welcome back to another episode of The Undetected Narcissist. Yes, I cut the intro because this one is a little bit long and I respect your time. The mirror and the medicine, healing through shadow integration. I have a warning, this episode might feel like a shot, but it's the kind that immunizes you from spiritual ego. What you're about to hear is the transmission of raw truth, radical self-honesty, and reverence for the shadow, for the mirror, and the mystery of our evolution. This is not about canceling anyone. This is about reclaiming everything. The pain, the projections, the power. It's about how we face the darkness within ourselves, not to fight it, but to hold it, integrate it, alchemize it. In this episode, I will share my personal journey of shadow integration, spiritual trauma, and what I saw reflected in Teal Swan, a mirror that cracked something open in me and gave birth to this message. How I chose the path of integration over inflation and a path towards higher consciousness, not spiritual narcissism. In a previous episode, The Pain Story or The Soul Lesson, I unpacked how one woman's narcissistic, vulnerable mother was her mirror and teacher. They were opposites and both served a purpose, even when the human experience can't stand their mirror, but the soul understands why. Some might grasp these concepts and others might not, and that's okay. But if you get triggered, something inside of you is trying to get your attention. It is like a cry for help to dive deep into self-reflection. From there, you explore your pain story by recognizing the triggers, being open to healing and integrating. So I recommend listening to The Pain Story or Soul Lesson first if you haven't already. As odd as it may sound, I'm excited to dive into the world of spiritual narcissism and shadow integration today. We'll explore the difference between feeding the ego and mastering the darkness of true enlightenment. I will do my best to highlight the differences between feeding the ego and mastering your shadow self. So let me begin by sharing something you may not know. I'm studying to become a psilocybin facilitator. Why? Because I'm absolutely fascinated by the neuroplasticity of the brain and how psychedelics, like magic mushrooms, can bypass the ego and create harmony between parts of the brain that don't typically communicate. Pretty cool, right? What's even more amazing is that the sacred medicines are being used to support people healing from deep depression, PTSD, addiction, even brain injuries, and yes, even narcissism. And yes, I've taken mushrooms. My first trip was one of my life's most profound spiritual experiences, beautifully orchestrated by the universe with synchronicities I could not ignore. If you want to feel one with the Creator and vibrate with unconditional love, this medicine has the potential to open that door. During that trip, something surfaced. I encountered one of my invisible walls, a block around intimacy and marriage. It was a gift, the kind of gift only truth can bring. Now, as part of my training, we must learn about shadow work, which is my specialty. Almost every client I work with eventually needs a parts integration or some inner child healing. My instructor recommended one of the videos to us students, which he labeled The Mirror on What We Hate, but the real title is Why People Hate Teal Swan. Yes, that Teal Swan. And yes, I laughed, not out of judgment, but because the irony was divine. I must share that I was not aware my instructor was a fan of Teal Swan, and he admired certain aspects of her work, and that is okay. All of this content comes from a place of awareness, not judgment. Let me explain the difference so that you can grasp the concept. Awareness comes from a neutral, compassionate, and understanding lens of perspective. Coming from a 5D mindset, it is just information. I have zero attachment to the information I've gathered. I see it, I get it. Now, if judgment is a 3D trait and a mindset that leads to perceiving and assuming the person is flawed. If I want to feed my ego, this person is below me. I could feel a sense of entitlement and other insulting, rigid viewpoints. I do not operate that way. Nobody can heal from those lower destructive thought patterns. So let's move on. When I told him that Teal Swan has spiritual narcissism, he was shocked. He did not want to listen and believed I hated her, but I do not. I suggested he watch the documentary The Deep End to broaden his perspective. Well, he didn't, because we had a week before the next class and he masked the title of the video, Why People Hate Teal Swan. Rather than dropping down and taking it personally in 3D frequencies of, how dare you, regret for speaking my truth, feeling like a classroom embarrassment or getting angry or even feeling insulted, I laughed. I stayed centered in the 5D realm of love, joy, and gratitude. I knew this was going to be juicy. Here is something you, dear listeners, do not know. Teal is my mirror. We share similar shadow traits and one archetype. We are the polar opposite of spiritual enlightenment and the approaches we follow, and that's exactly what makes this conversation so powerful. It was divinely timed for the specific topic I intended to cover in Season 4. Are you shocked? Just wait and listen, please. I will unfold and unpack this perfectly so that everyone can comprehend and grasp how I am her mirror. So, have you ever heard of the term narpath? It's a combination of narcissist and an empath. Sounds contradictory, but it's very real. But that sensitivity, when wounded and unhealed, can be weaponized. That's when the shadow comes to play. When someone you love or trust shows their shadow side, it can be shocking, sometimes violent, and often heartbreaking. Now, another perfect example is the 7 deadly sins. All those sins are shadow aspects that everyone has within them. You heard me, everyone. What matters is whether we master the shadow self aspect or allow them to consume our souls, causing more harm to others and ourselves for the next 7 generations. I say no. The truth is, if we do not master, heal, and integrate our shadow self aspect, those deadly sins and tendencies are stored in our DNA for other generations to resolve. It's not fair, but it's true. All these countless years of suffering could have been avoided if we had this information. Now, this just popped in my awareness, and I'm not religious, but this does make sense because I heard the sins of our fathers and was guided to look it up. Here's what I found. The concept of the sins of the father is referred to several Bible verses. While some verses suggest God punishes children for their parents' sin, others clarify that individuals are ultimately held accountable for their own actions. Therefore, what I just shared is spot on. It is not our Creator punishing us, but we punishing ourselves and our offspring within the coding of our DNA. But I know how to clear it, and I have. So there's some good news, right? Hollywood and anti-heroes. Hollywood glamorizes the dark hero archetype, as seen in John Wick, Dexter, Peaky Blinders, and any Marvel series. We eat it up. But we also internalize it. We get numb to the violence, gore, and pure revenge. The sad realization is that the entertainment industry has become incredibly darker from the movies I saw in the 1970s and early 2000s. More gore, violence, rape, hatred, nudity, explicit sex, crime, and revenge. Why? Shock value. And we pay for it. We love it. We want more of it. Stand in line for it. And we can't believe our eyes. Give me more, we say. But I do not. And here is why. It's conditioning and grooming young minds. You see my choice of words? It influences more of these shadow self aspects within us all by removing the filter of morals, values, and ethics. And by removing the filter and making it more acceptable, that explains why we are witnessing more violence within our schools and communities. Online trolls, catfishing, clickbait, and scammers. Hunger for fame and social media likes. Mental health crisis like the anxious generation, sex trafficking, addictive behaviors like social media, drugs, and porn. A revenge mindset like random shootings. Take what's mine or steal without consequences. Marry for money, not love. And such other toxic, dysfunctional, mindless programming and conditioning in our world today. We are capable of so much more. than these barbaric, egotistical ways of thinking, acting, and behaving. It's 2025. On the flip side, it allows actors a healthy release by playing a villain. It is pretend, but have they healed and integrated their shadow self aspect? That's the real question. So in a way, unintentionally and unconsciously, we are planting the seeds of destruction of life instead of promoting life. We should be creating entertainment that inspires, uplifts us, encourages equality, connection, and cooperation, rather than separation and further dark destruction. I was watching the series 1923, and I saw many people in the show who did not integrate and heal their shadow aspects, but weaponized them, even the priests and nuns. And the one that stood out the most was the filthy rich man that said, "I will take what's mine," or "steal your land and make it my own" attitude. And as one man said on the show, he is dark, darker than dark, pure evil. So if Hollywood is listening, I want something inspiring that fills me with hope in a world currently filled with real-life violence, wars, anger, revenge, inflated egos, liars, backstabbers, and pretend happiness. I believe the collective of 4D and 5D people want the same thing, as evidenced by my own experience of stopping going to the movies. Understanding spiritual narcissism. Spiritual narcissism at its core is a choice to use your shadow instead of healing it. You can become an influencer without ever integrating the parts of yourself that are wounded, manipulative, and crave attention and fame. They have this "I will transform your life through punishment and submission," or "God told me to punish you for your sins." So backwards, but people pay good money for this form of punishment, humiliation, and cruelty, seeking spiritual enlightenment. Therefore, the individual recognizes their shadow self side, and through spiritual practices of self-enhancement, can fool some of us into thinking we're evolving and growing, when all we're growing is our own dark shadow ego. Light versus dark. They are teaching what they know as spiritual enlightenment by causing pain and suffering to others rather than causing no harm to them. It's all rooted in unintegrated fear, anger that has turned into deep-seated resentment and unresolved childhood traumas. Yes, trauma. Therefore, some will initially appear caring and thoughtful, luring you into their web to extract your money. It's love bombing, baby, in the name of spirituality. Yes, these individuals can be intimidating, cutthroat, and ruthless when their methods of spiritual transformation are challenged or questioned. I mean, how dare you question my authority? A little humor here. Even when another triggers these spiritual or religious figures or leaders, all the dark, evil, ugly traits and thought patterns of human consciousness can come crawling to the surface. This can leave others feeling emotionally invalidated, rejected, abandoned, betrayed, and victimized. These spiritual narcissists will gaslight you so well that your head might spin. Then comes the threats that you're gonna go to hell, or that you will suffer and be punished for not believing in a specific religion or living a true spiritual lifestyle. Even Christians have a bad reputation, because if you're not a Christian, then you're going to hell. This explains why many people today are seeking more of a spiritual approach than a religious lifestyle. It does not excuse their behaviors and actions. I want you to understand and recognize the why and how it happens. The flip side of spiritual narcissism can range from even toxic positivity, such as the rigid belief or saying good vibes only. Even toxic positivity can be a form of shadow, the good vibe only crowd, or religious threats of damnation. Therefore, when I watched the Teal Swan documentary back in 2022, The Deep End, I saw it in action. The ego cloaked in spiritual wisdom and practices. The methods felt like sexual dominance, control, and power, masquerading as healing. I observed a blend of ego and empathic qualities, along with claims to channel beings of light and love. But I also witnessed spiritual narcissism in practice, with the way people were treated and how she claimed to passionately hate the spiritual community. That word, hate says it all if you're genuinely listening. Even Sadidakov on the website Medium wrote a fantastic article about the Deep End documentary and said why Teal Swan's cult of personality is dangerous to trauma survivors. If you check out her article, you might get a clearer picture of what I'm trying to relay if you have been a victim of spiritual narcissism or question if someone you might know might be a victim. Therefore, I believe in free will and the healing process, which takes time. I will not force another person into submission by waterboarding them in a swimming pool and then whispering in their ear when they're shattered into pieces, "I love you." Yeah, that happened to that strong-willed woman, and she had a smile on her face. The camera did not lie. And I knew that this is not the path I walk as a spiritual advisor and healer. Even Sister Miriam wanted me to stop her, but I don't have 1 million followers. I believe in boundaries, yes, but not in harm. As a spiritual advisor and healer, I believe in the power of sacred space, the importance of discernment, and the value of choosing compassion over manipulation and control. So I watched the recommended video about why people hate Teal Swan and was not offended or triggered. It was the exact opposite. So when I was called upon in the Zoom class to share my thoughts and feelings about her video, I think I shocked my instructor. I told him that I loved it and that it inspired this content. In a way, I could tell he was mystified, and I was guided from above to share more. I spoke about her coming from a place of understanding, wisdom, compassion, and unconditional love. I explained the why factor from a place of non-judgment. That day, I was the teacher, not the student. Now let's get personal. Teal and I share a history of various forms of child abuse and trauma by a parental figure. Both of us endured spiritual abuse. It leaves a mark. She was raised in a cult, and a strict Christian who beat his, wives and children raised me. If you don't process that pain, it shows up as rage. In the episode of Hot Rage versus Cold Rage, I talk about that. The next one we share are control and manipulation. Then we share the angel/fairy godmother archetype. But there's an even darker side to this archetype. We are survivors, she and I. To survive, we built big, invisible walls. So let's talk about anger and rage. Before I proceed, I want to approach this subject matter from a place of love and wisdom rather than fear. Let me make this clear. Why? I want you to understand the mind and shadow self aspect of the person you fell in love with and trusted. Who was your best friend, business partner, spiritual teacher, or family member? Their extreme anger, brutal honesty, and cutthroat verbal abuse were their shadow selves coming out and exposing itself before your eyes. What was seen cannot be unseen. They show their true colors. When someone shows their shadow self, it can be rather shocking and scary. The words that cut you so deeply that you are still bleeding years later can haunt you in your dreams, and Hollywood loves it. It explains why a nun or priest who calls himself a disciple of God can abuse a child. The repressed anger, resentment, and rage come out, and they rationalize it, justify that it is the medicine you need, and they hide behind the mask of religion. This false assumption and righteousness attitude permits them to harm others because they believe it is God's will or God told them to do it. Let me make this clear. What speaks to them is not our Creator, but their dark shadow self, wounded ego, and dark angelic archetype. Let's move on. How did I heal my angry shadow self side? Since my parents' number one form of punishment was spanking, not with hands, but hitting with various wooden or metal objects, and some broke during the beatings, I vowed myself to not do this. Being harshly spanked and beaten only taught me that it was a cruel form of punishment, full of hot rage and anger. Since I experienced extreme child abuse, I knew I needed help. I went to counseling at a young age and started reading spiritual and self-help books. The first book I read about anger that spoke to me was The Dance of Anger. I highly recommend it. When I knew I was going to be a parent, I took parenting classes and read books about new approaches in parenting. Therefore, since I helped raise my younger brother and healed in my early teenage years, I became the kiddo you could trust with your infant and toddler, even children with special needs and disabilities. I was that safe space. Having spent years caring for other people's children and gaining valuable knowledge, I felt pretty confident in my tools that I acquired. However, our kids learn to push our buttons so well. They strive to master the art of no boundaries until they become a teenager. They break the rules, and some even try to get their parents to snap. When I felt like I had no other options available in my parental toolbook, I tried spanking with my hand. I know, I hate to admit it. I've spanked my children 3 times, maybe 4, and every time it broke me. I begged for forgiveness after the act. I never spanked out of anger, but more frustration. I felt the shame and guilt of betraying my core values for weeks, months, and even years. This is not who I am or who I want to be, but this is my shadow self aspect coming out. I vowed never to do it again, but I did. Not to my children, but a covert narcissist. I've hit my son's father with a lint roller brush once in a moment of reactive abuse while trying to protect our baby from his drunken violence. Again, not proud, but it's my truth. Can anyone relate? I know some people believe spanking is acceptable, and they survived it, but every child responds differently. Now I must share this truth. When I fell from grace, I had to learn not to beat myself up mentally and emotionally. This is not an easy task, as some of you may know. The things we can think and say about ourselves can be so damaging and destructive. So be kind. Some people, when they fall from grace, will physically hurt themselves or spiral down into addictive behaviors because of the guilt and shame. I had to remember that I am human and no human is perfect. I had to take my advice, learn from the lesson, show myself grace and forgiveness, and find positive solutions to avoid my shadow aspect of anger from hurting myself and another with my words or actions. When I feel that anger bubbling to the surface, which is very rare, that is my warning sign to calm down, disengage, walk away, clear my mind. So here's the next one. I've seduced and manipulated in my younger years, used my sexuality, my voice, and my body as a tool to feel powerful. I even had the perfect outfit to make a man drool and want me. Teal Swan does the same thing. Some of us might be saying, "You go, girl," but I hurt people who didn't deserve it. I was emotionally unavailable and into the hot and cold push and pull passion mind games. Then when I wanted a genuine connection, I, of course, picked the wrong partners again and again. To those men, I am sorry. Thank you for being my teacher. But I've changed. I stopped confusing passion with pain. In time, I stopped chasing the emotional highs and lows of trauma bonding. I chose connection, intimacy, and genuine, unconditional love, and I have it, so thank you. This should explain why the wounded shadow self seeks to control and manipulate. Therefore, it wants to feel empowered rather than weak and helpless, as we did when we were innocent, fragile, and frightened. So we learn to manipulate others with our bodies, words, and seductive charms to seek sexual gratification, not connection. We confuse sex with love, but it's a false sense of love masked behind insecurities, shame, abandonment, rejection, and inner child wounds. And when I recognized these shadow parts within me that were causing more harm to others, I had to go within and dive deep into my pain stories. In some ways, I had to face my demons, and everyone has a dark side within them. What matters most is who is running your life. The wounded fragment, shadow parts, or the integrated, whole, wise spirit within us all. My transformation did not happen overnight. It took years of self-reflection, understanding, and integration. I became a trusted, safe space for my clients. People feel it and see it. You can hear the compassion in my voice. I don't manipulate anyone. I magnetize. Integrating is the hardest thing we'll ever do, but it's also the most liberating. So let's talk about the angel archetype versus the shadow dark angel. Teal and I share this angel archetype, and some call it the fairy godmother. I know that I'm a messenger of light and love, and I wrote about it in the first book that I channeled in 2012, Affirming and Focusing on Living a Better Life, when I received a message for the world. I know that I'm here in a time of great need to deliver a message of guidance and instruction from our Creator for humanity. First, let me clarify this. I'm not an actual angel. Still, I do have a strong connection with the angelic realm. I've been called many things by my clients, such as a saint, an angel, heaven sent, a blessing, God speaks to you, and told the world needs more people like me in it. I am a channel for the angelic realm. There is great joy when I use it, whether I'm working with clients or creating this content. Many people have told me that I'm a safe space because I have loving and nurturing qualities that I have embodied. When it comes to the role of the fairy godmother, I enjoy helping someone in need, whether it's a random stranger or someone I'm called to serve, with no expectations of anything in return. I say I am here to serve. And I get angelic messages all the time. Remember my friend who was writing her second book on forgiveness? That angelic hit was for her, and she listened, and I'm her cheerleader and want her to thrive. Angels of light do not waterboard wounded people seeking light. They nurture. They do not laugh at your pain and smile when you are shattered into pieces. Light angels are here to heal, not harm, uplift, and not destroy. Yes, we can feel your pain and suffering, but we alchemize that pain and suffering into wisdom, compassion, forgiveness, and unconditional love. We do it by pulling you out of the dark 3D framework and lifting you into the light 4D and 5D framework. Now the shadow side of this archetype occurs when individuals claim to be in touch with angelic guidance and are empaths, yet they use their abilities not to heal, but to harm for the sake of control and ego enhancement. They have not entirely healed from their childhood traumas or integrated their shadow because their dark actions contradict their words. The dark angel can be fierce, brutal, and cold in their actions. Whatever the actions they are tasked with, they perform it with destructive tendencies, such as waterboarding, and their methods never cease to amaze other angels like me. The dark angel will drag you deeper into the 3D thought patterns surrounding family, feeding your mind with hatred, separation, a victim mentality, and self-righteous pride. And never would I, as a light angel, suggest that you imagine committing suicide. Yes, she did create a video that was removed from YouTube. Can you see the polar opposite? As for the fairy godmother aspect, when weaponized, this dark archetype will be a scorekeeper. Nothing is for free and everything comes with a steep price. There is a you owe me attitude, and that is when recruitment comes into play. Yes, recruitment, because religion and spiritual cults are a business. To stay in business, they need more followers. Now they know your dirty secrets and sins, which can be weaponized against you. Therefore, these spiritual narcissistic individuals will use games from the 3D framework, like intimidation, belittling, devaluing, gaslighting, and guilt-tripping. Soon you might find yourself filled with regret, shame, and fear of exposure to the people you care about. Remember the pattern: love bomb, devalue, discard. And one last thing Teal and I have in common is that we both were led down the path of psychedelics for spiritual enhancement and growth. I like mushrooms, and she likes poisonous toads. Hiding behind a mask. Everything you are, including your shadow, is sacred. Teal's video inspired me. If I had not integrated my shadow and all the various parts, I would have taken it personally and felt targeted or insulted by my instructor. Instead, what I saw and heard in Teal was her confidence as she spoke. It was real, and her insights were powerful. but I also saw repressed anger and sexual wounds that she hadn't healed. The pain is still hiding behind the mask. And I wondered, just wondered, if that it was her soul and spirit crying out for a response or answer to why people hate her. I don't walk her path, but I see her. I am shining my light within, and I see her. I get her. Hello, dear one. And yes, I respect the polarity she represents. So if Teal ever hears this, I see you and I hear you, dear one. I made this for you. The universe aligned us in this moment not through conflict, but through contrast. May these words support the collective, not through pain, but through light, not through fear, but through radical, honest, embodied love. Thank you, Teal, for being my mirror. With reverence, Angela Meyer, Carrie Logan. Now, let's move on. Integrating the parts we hide. How do we heal? So, some of you might be wondering, what is shadow work? Shadow work generally involves 3 initial steps in the beginning. You recognize it, understand why it exists within us, and being open and willing to heal, integrate, and master the shadow self. The shadow self is those aspects of ourselves we repressed or denied. It is challenging and sometimes a painful process of self-discovery that can lead to greater self-awareness, healing, and personal growth. The core component of shadow work compromises these 3 steps, and yes, there is a 4th step, and I like to call it continued education because it never ends. So let's break down these steps. Step 1, recognizing, identifying. First, we must recognize the triggers within us. When we do not recognize or realize it, we're on autopilot. The subconscious mind runs the show, and our shadow self acts as it pleases. We become reactive instead of calmly observing and responding to situations. That is why we must be open to identifying situations, people, or emotions that cause strong, adverse, negative reactions or emotional responses, which are often trapped within the 3D human consciousness levels ranging from 175 to 20. The triggers that bring out hate, resentment, the desire to guilt trip others, the feelings of needing to perform to seek approval, playing the blame game and not taking responsibility for our actions. Then there can be racism, jealousy, envy, lust, greed, revenge, rage, bullying, and the pleasure of watching or hurting other people. This includes all the deadly sins that people preach to create fear within us or warn us that we're going to hell. Once you can identify your shadow self parts, you want to dive a little deeper. This means recognizing the specific negative emotions or judgments towards self or others that trigger a response from within. These can also be behaviors like deflection, denial, or taking something personally. There is also projection, which can be hard to spot because we are so emotionally triggered. Therefore, becoming aware of how we might project our unwanted traits or emotions onto others is a crucial self-awareness tool. Step 2, exploring and understanding. This is what I do best. Forget those coffee conversations. I will have you in the deep end of the ocean within 10 minutes. Sounds exciting, right? Why? It's so freeing to be able to talk to someone who makes you feel safe. You feel truly heard, seen, understood, and without judgment, shame, or blame. You talk and I listen. We dive so deep that we come to the conclusion, it is what it is. Just information from past pain stories and shadow aspects of the wounded self. You've got to get real, and you've got to dive deep with love, compassion, acceptance, enlightenment, and reverence. You can explore the roots of your shadow self by engaging in deep self-reflection through journaling, talking to a therapist, or practicing other methods. This takes patience, compassion, and grace. I spoke about the why factor and finding forgiveness for the unforgivable. To heal, I needed to know why. why I was being triggered or reactive. Exploring the reasons behind the reactions, judgment, and behavior, including their origins in past experiences, is key. Without the why factor, one is still lost in the shadows. Step 3. Integrating the parts we hide and healing. When we first recognize that shadow self is running our lives and the lives of others, it can create a great deal of guilt, shame, humiliation, trigger false beliefs about ourselves, and can be scary. That is why having self-compassion is key. Nobody's perfect, and everyone has a shadow self with various shadow aspects. Some are darker than others too. Just know this truth: you are not alone or the only one. Practicing self-compassion and self-acceptance for your shadow self is essential. I never said this work was easy, so be kind and gentle with yourself. I recognize that these parts are natural parts of being human, don't you? I mean, we all get angry. And that is why I say all the tools we need for self-healing, transformation, integration, and soul liberation exist within 4D human consciousness. This is when I do inner child work and parts therapy. In a gentle and motherly approach, I bring your shadow aspect into your conscious awareness through meditation or hypnosis. My approach is different because I include the I and we, you and I, and aspects of them as part of your whole self, rather than rejecting them. I have a conversation with that fragmented, wounded part and the parts hiding behind in the dark. It's powerful work. I like to weave in all the 5D human consciousness emotions, behaviors, and traits, such as joy, happiness, being easy to let the little things go, being unattached to outcomes, peace of mind, and healthy inner confidence. Why? Some parts can be on the fence and do not believe that you are ready for change. So when we show them through our imagination how this new life can be and will be, these unintegrated parts can have a clearer picture of this new reality of wholeness instead of separation. Step 4. Continued growth, continued practice. We did enroll in a school of life. That is why we're here, to learn lessons. Regular self-reflection is key. Why? Life does throw us curveballs. One moment we're standing on top of a mountain, feel great, and the following week we're in the deep end of the valley. You know my truth, my pain story. We can stay in the valley and settle, or climb another mountain. It sucks to accept this truth of being human. There is that saying, life is full of ups and downs. Healthy tools, mastering your shadow self aspect. I realize that when I do not have healthy alternatives or tools available, our shadow self will leak out and cause hell. We need to create a list of alternative options to avoid life's pitfalls. So here are some ideas. When it comes to anger, this trapped energy needs to be released through movement and action. That is why I suggest exercise, screaming, hiking, dancing to loud music, and even sex. Think of it as hot energy that wants to explode. I know playing video games is a good release, but it still doesn't compare to the release that comes from movement and action. Then there are the cold and blue emotions like depression, anxiety, and stress. These emotional states need the exact polar opposite. A person's body and nervous system seeks comfort, solitude, and relaxation. Some people meditate, read a book, soak in a bath, get a massage, or drink a glass of wine. We must honor the signals and messages our bodies send us, as they are trying to communicate what they need from us. After all, it's your oldest friend. Okay, before I close, I want to throw out these ideas and concepts. What if the person you judge is actually your most excellent teacher? Even if that person is Teal Swan. I say this because some might think or believe I'm putting a target on my back, but I'm not. This isn't a cancellation. It's a conversation. A message coming from love to the mirror that cracked me open and inspired this information. This is how I faced my shadow and chose the light over the dark ways of spiritual evolution. Yes, we share the same wounds. However, I decided on a softer, divinely guided approach to heal my clients and facilitating a spiritual awakening. Both work, but they are two different tools and mentalities. This content is my response from the heart. If you made it this far, thank you. You've just walked through the shadows with me, through truth, through a mirror that many fear to face. But you didn't turn away. And maybe that's how we heal the collective, not by judging the darkness, but by daring to meet it within ourselves and each other. If this episode stirs something in you, sit with it. Breathe with it. Let it speak. And if you feel called to share this with someone stuck in the shadows, trust that nudge. That's your higher self whispering, this medicine is meant to move. Since this is deep work and I have constructed a standalone guided meditation titled The Cracked Mirror, A Journey to Wholeness, the focus will be on shadow integration and 5D embodiment, supporting you and walking through life with clarity, compassion, and self-empowerment. Until next time, walk gently, love boldly, and remember, you are not too much. You are a mirror too. And love and light, Angela Meyer and Carrie Logan. Bye.